All right. Good afternoon, folks. Sorry, there's a bit of confusion. Although the talk was supposed to be titled Future of Health, which I will cover a bit in here, for something a little more relevant, I think, for the Casual Connect audience, I was going to instead talk a bit about what I'm seeing in virtual reality, augmented reality, and especially what I want to see outside of games and entertainment. I think that's kind of what we tend to assume the most of, but I'm actually very excited by the non-obvious implications, which I'll chat a little bit about. So I'm Tim Chang with Mayfield Fund. We're one of the first early-stage venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, established in 1969. As a fund, we are now investing out of fund number 15. 46 years later, have done hundreds and hundreds of investments, including several hundred IPOs and M&As, and I lead the consumer as well as digital health practice there. It's an area that's really something that's close to my heart because back in grad school days, I was working on programming telepresence and robotics when TCP first came out. So this was back when internet was just being born, and one of the most compelling websites back then was somebody put a webcam aimed at a fish tank, and you'd hit the refresh button every 30 seconds to see if the fish had moved. And we were trying to figure out how to make telerobots controllable over really unreliable networks back then. Had also done quite a bit as a gamer, grew up programming games, and myself in prior life had done quite a bit in acting, and so the future of storytelling is something I'm very passionate about as well. So let's talk a bit about what's going on in VR and the cutting edge of things. The most obvious things in VR right now seem to be gaming entertainment, but something that I think a lot about is that most VR and AR applications and demos today, I think they're really just nerdy novelty wear. What I mean by that, you'll try it, it's awesome, makes for good headlines or blog reading, but are you really going to use it, 30 days later? Are you going to use it for even 3 hours later? So this is a big question I always ask to entrepreneurs and startups in this area. Number one, would this VR or AR application be used habitually? Will people use it every week, every day even? And would they use it a year later after the initial novelty, the demo, has worn off? Honestly, I think 80% of the things you're seeing there, the answer is no today. Second key question, your real competition for most VR applications is just when is an app-based experience good enough? When is it not good enough? Is it something that you could just do, frankly, on a flat surface, on a tablet or a laptop screen? Where I'm seeing the applications that are best for VR when just a regular application is not good enough is when you're doing something with the human senses. Is it sensory processing, filtering? Is it sensory simulation, stimulation, augmenting of human senses? Perhaps substitution or transposition of human senses. That's where a regular app-based experience is not good enough. So let's talk a bit about the obvious ones. In gaming and entertainment, obviously we've all seen the explosion of Pokemon Go. Interestingly, Niantic built a similar game off that engine before, and so it stands to reason if Pokemon Go has shown the world what's possible. Let's think about the other genres and alternative reality worlds that might work on a Niantic-style engine. So would it be fantasy ARGs, cyberpunk types of things, vampire, crime, mafia, superheroes, where you're going around and living alternate identities in the real world? Wonderful book by author Charles Stross, a great cyberpunk author. Halting State painted a great vision of what that might look like with these sort of next-gen Pokemon Go type of engines. Another area I'm seeing is instead of you trying to put a whole Vive system in your living room, why not have VR theme parks? These would potentially replace or augment Disney World, Disneyland. They might be the perfect thing to pop up in, say, the Mall of America or at Westfield Malls, where you can use physical environments, headsets, and more realistic props to create these physical space experiences, very much similar to what we're seeing some demos out there like Rift and The Void and others doing together. One technology I'm really keen to see is systems that you can easily scan a physical space, immediately map it into a VR map, and then overlay experiences on top of that. What if you could do that in your home? If you could simply take your mobile phone with a stereoscopic cam thing, walk through it, map it in, and then have infinite replayability, but you have the physical spaces, the hallways, the doors, the rooms, all measured out, that you could turn into a game map and put dynamic sort of game or experience content onto existing physical spaces for sort of that mixed reality kind of experience. Some genres I can't wait to play personally. Giant mechs I always thought would be way better in VR, basically because imagine that you're actually in the cockpit. You can actually mess and twiddle with all the control surfaces while looking around. So any game genres where your field of view may be independent from how you're moving. This would apply for things like tanks, flight and space sims, With the tactile controllers, very interested in sort of how martial arts and fighting games might actually incorporate real-world moves, and who knows, you might actually learn a few skills in the process. More realistic first-person shooters where you actually have props that are more gun-shaped. I always thought that sort of the CSI Crime Lab could be interesting when you have to go physically investigate simulated crime scenes and deduce things. Puzzle, hidden object, and escape room games would be very well suited for VR because of the sensory simulation as well. When it comes to media and other forms of entertainment, VR music, I think, is one that's quite interesting. Definitely worth checking out the demo of the Wave and showing how you possibly could enjoy a virtual EDC even better than the real-life EDC in Vegas. I'm most excited how VR can actually complement the creation experience in addition to the consumption part of it, as well as the live performance in VR and then the notion of quote-unquote live events. I think we're going to see the rise of AR sort of place tagging. So this will apply for things like virtual reality and augmented reality art. Advertising and marketing will be a very obvious application of this, but maybe we'll see new forms of digital street art and graffiti popping up. Social applications could be, imagine sort of Foursquare-like check-ins with social Easter eggs you leave for your friends or others to see. And then this might reinvent the whole practice of geocaching, where we have real-life games out there that have physical object geocaching. Now you might do more digital geocaching there as well. With marketing and advertising, I also think with this kind of place tagging, we might see some really good innovation in virtual tourism, but also in sort of the learning aspects, the museum part of things, the historical references. Something I'd love to see is, imagine timelining combined with places. So if you wanted to see what Fifth and Market looked like back in 1972, and then 1960, and then 1875, those sorts of things is where you can actually overlay basically sort of Google Earth meets Street View plus historical timelines. That could be quite an interesting way to experience different places. We've seen some really fun cooking kind of game demos. I'm actually interested, what if we can combine this with real-world food and cooking databases, like the work of Nathan Myhrvold with a gastro kind of molecular technology cooking, but also if you could crowdsource actual recipes, like the specific way grandma's pancakes were made, or maybe the diner down the street, it'd be quite interesting to see, could you create sort of a VR Iron Chef that draws from real-world data for how the recipes work, crowdsourcing actual recipes that are done there, and seeing if you end up creating the world's most elaborate sort of food and cooking database that has real-world corollaries. So it's not just that it succeeds as a sort of scenario in the game, but you end up learning how to create really good dishes. So I think we'll see a combination of these simulations plus real-world data leading to learnings in both worlds. On the professional aspects, of course, we're going to see VR intercept with a lot of existing practices out there. We're going to see it disrupt healthcare, construction, the design industry. You can see IDEO designers using VR headsets in the future. In healthcare, I'm really interested not just in helping rehearse for surgeries or perform them better, but the notion of explaining procedures to patients ahead of time. If you remember the movie Fantastic Voyage from decades ago, what if you are doing an MRI scan and then you fly inside your own body and take sort of a VR Fantastic Voyage within yourself? Hugely interesting for pregnancy cycles when you can go inside the womb and virtually visit your soon-to-be-born baby as well. Great demo, by the way, by Verse when they showed that off at TED. Hugely emotionally impacting to go inside the womb and see a sort of a fetus at giant scale within there. These could be light games, the VR job sims, just like Vive had the demo of the diner kitchen chef. But as they get a little more high fidelity, these become VR trainers for real jobs, and then someday VR telecommuting interfaces for actually doing the real work within VR. That part gets pretty interesting. Other industries, construction and architecture. I'm dying for V-remodel for myself. I'm dealing with trying to pick out of 100 textures for floors and wallpaper, and it's total hell. That makes total sense for a VR type of interface. And data visualization makes a lot of sense for this area as well. Visualizing sort of next moves. One idea here is, imagine, well, you're playing chess or Go, and the AI and the VR engine is basically showing all the possible next moves and maybe 3 moves ahead. Think about how that might apply for the enterprise world, where you are looking at maybe a strategic map of international expansion and sort of all the possible next moves and those ahead of them are being visualized for you in real time. Where data visualization is also very helpful is in the notion of VR memory castles. The human brain is wired to better recall things when spatially laid out. In fact, that's how the sort of super memory competitors work. They create memory castles out of mnemonics, placing numbers, facts, figures, names within rooms. They construct elaborate sort of constructions or buildings. That's how you can recall pi out to 1,000 digits sometimes without assistance. But VR is the perfect type of interface for creating those memory castles. A file cabinet of every memory or every fact you need arranged more spatially is probably more efficient than Evernote or a search tool or any of those sorts of technologies that we use today. I thought a fun one for sort of self-development is VR Phobia Trainer. A friend of mine rebuilt a scene out of The Matrix where Morpheus is teaching Neo how to jump over buildings. In the process, I think he fell down something like 122 times, 20 stories, and he said he inadvertently cured his fear of heights in the process. What else could we cure phobias of? Public speaking, spiders, plane crashes, all sorts of things like that. So VR Phobia Trainer, I think, would be something that would be pretty interesting coming out on market. Now, in the notion of commerce and shopping, this is a really big one. And here, we're going to see AR heads-up display type of overlays on top of existing real-world apps we already use habitually, whether it's Yelp or Zillow, Amazon for shopping, OpenTable, Nextdoor for hyperlocal. This part gets pretty interesting. I've always thought that would be a great type of interface. I want to know, what is that chair? What's it cost? Who's the maker? I want to know who lives in that house, what do they pay for it, what's the property tax reported value, those sorts of things where you can get overlaid data on demand for the things you see around you in the real world. This also applies quite well for experiential purchasing. What I mean by that is anything that showrooming is good for would be well suited for VR or AR type of shopping experiences. You probably wouldn't need sharper image. You could do that in a VR setting for unique novelty products you haven't seen before. I predict probably soon Kickstarter. Any good Kickstarter campaign will need a VR demo in addition to a video for any kind of product that's experiential and needs explaining versus just a flat image or a 2D video. On the social side, I think we're going to see some really good lessons and techniques from the MMO world applied for the people around you so that you can see their profile stats, who they are, their affiliations, where they graduated from, all those sorts of things, people in common. And so that's something I always loved about MMOs is whenever you moused over a character, all their stats would pop up and you could tell friend or foe, somebody I want to meet, what do they have in common, what do we want to trade, those sorts of things. You can imagine that then applying into the world around you. The fun part is, what if your next version of About.me is you choosing what you want to see, to show for sort of your overlay data when other people see you, and how you will allow them to connect with you. On the social side, some fun questions to probe that I've been noodling a lot about. What are the VR and augmented reality versions of emoji? What would those be in that context? How about, what would stickers be? Would they be animations of 3D objects that overlay? Animated GIFs would probably have some sort of analog in this world. What would a selfie in VR or AR be? What would filters be? How would you filter your reality or what you see? What would the equivalent of an Instagram experience be like for capturing moments and sharing them? What would messaging a la Snapchat be in a VR type of context? While those platforms will probably try to add VR into their existing systems, I believe whole new networks will be created ground up natively for these platforms that will be things we haven't encountered before. So all sorts of other things will pop up that I'm really pretty excited about on the social front. In terms of storytelling and creativity, do you guys remember that scene from The Matrix when they're saying sort of, I need guns, and then suddenly gun racks start flying out? Probably similar to the holodeck in Star Trek as well, but here's what I've been looking for entrepreneurs to build. I think the best experience for sort of a Minecraft-like creator in VR would probably be something where you simply maybe type in like a chat or voice interface and say, you know what, I want to ride a whale. And then the engine would simply grab the most fitting public open source 3D object for a whale, and might pick from 3, it'd plop it in, and then you might say, well, I want that whale to be pink. It would recolor it. Then you'd say, I wanted to shoot lasers out of his eyes. And the basic physics engine will understand how to render these things in real time. Then you might be able to get pretty wacky and say, I want it to be a robot whale, and I want to duel another person on it. And the engine would be able to, on the fly, render these things and have you play with them. Kind of, it reminds me of a VR version of Scribblenauts, if anyone ever played that game back in Nintendo back in the day, the magic of that was typing in anything out of thousands of objects and having that object drop out of the sky because Nintendo already had that object in the libraries. We have that same potential in VR because we have thousands of open source public 3D objects already out there. Ingesting them into an engine like this where you can intuitively just type or say what you want and then have verbs which this engine would be able to render would be an ideal, I think, sort of sandbox creation world. So if any entrepreneurs working in that, let me know. I'd love to talk to you about that. So in terms of what VR could also do, I think a lot about expanded consciousness and shifting our perception as well. Something I am looking for also, instead of Netflix, I'm looking for net trips. VR is the perfect platform to simulate an LSD trip or an ayahuasca journey or something like that, all digitally, and probably take you to similar places mentally and physically as well. This is artist Android Jones, who I'm going to go track down. He's a best known artist at Burning Man, but these experiences in digital are just at a whole different level. This could be also a very good subscription service overlaid on things like Spotify or with other streaming music services, which takes that experience to whole new levels. Mindfulness and meditation augmented by VR, AR is also a no-brainer as well. Then we get to love and sex. Everybody's always thought, hey, VR sex makes a whole lot of sense here. Something I've been thinking more about is, well, if we take AI engines and chatbots, what would Cyrano de Bergerac look like in today's world? Cyrano, if you don't recall the old story, was a master wordsmith and master of seduction who would basically be the wingman for his friend in sort of courting a woman because he knew exactly what to write for that person. You can imagine sort of a beast mode in Tinder where somebody else is basically telling you what to say, right, as sort of a paid option in there. But basically, this could be Cyrano de Bergerac in augmented reality someday where basically you're talking to somebody and the engine is telling you exactly what to say, next move, next, next line. So this will be sort of AI and AR augmented love and dating, perhaps. By the way, that similar technology works perfectly well in an enterprise context. Let's say you're a salesman or you're negotiating a deal, you're doing a corp dev deal. AI and that AR overlay might even be telling you the next line to say. So it's sort of augmenting even how you work as a professional with such technologies. This does lead to the sort of level of something I think which will come up pretty soon. If you haven't seen it yet, Creative Control, which was an Amazon original movie, is quite interesting. They had Augmenta, a fictional augmented reality glass version, but the killer application was an avatar maker where, imagine from social media, Instagram, photos and videos, you could stitch together an avatar that's interactive of anybody, first yourself or anybody else you like. Imagine it's a love interest or a crush. Imagine then how you interact with that avatar, basically simulating whatever interaction you want to have with potentially anybody else out there, stitching it together from profile photos and videos already out there in public social media. This gets to some pretty interesting and twisted scenarios out there where you combine a MeBot, artificial intelligence, and your digital avatar representation. You could author your own digital ghost and basically be immortal. If you get hit by a truck tomorrow, still, your grandkids could talk to you and interact with you because if it had your whole corpus of all your past email, messages, social media output, that AI could probably simulate you. The MeBot could probably get you about 85, 90% accurate where somebody could interact with you and it would speak in the same tone and language that you would use. This does get to the notion of sort of mixed and then what I call remixed reality. If you could auto-enhance and auto-tune everyone and everything around you, why would you not want to do that all the time? If you could make every 6 into a perfect 9 in terms of physical appearance around you, do you think you would be a kinder person? Would you treat people better? If you take that to the extreme, why would you ever not want to see the world filtered, right? Just like nobody takes an unfiltered Instagram photo anymore. This will create a whole new class of, I think, sort of social problems, including VR addiction, in which case a great business opportunity would be VR addiction clinics. So that's something that I kind of think we'll be seeing as well. Now, the upside of VR is I've also seen VR therapeutics. What you're seeing right here is an Epley chair. There's only probably several hundred of them around the world. It's hugely expensive to help people treat vertigo and things like that. This actually can be achieved also as a VR app with a wearable to help people get over things like vertigo. There's also a startup called Vivid Vision treating lazy eye with VR headsets. So VR therapeutics will be an area I'm looking for and could be alternatives to more expensive healthcare devices out there. Almost at the end here, but if you remember the movie Her, This actually was illustrating the notion that augmented reality doesn't have to just happen through the eyes. It can happen through other senses like ears. So I kind of think of these as hearables. With hearables, you'd have other forms of these guardian angels, a 24/7 therapist or a coach or a Cyrano-style assistant telling you what to say or do next. If it happened to have the voice of Scarlett Johansson as an upsell, even better. But this also could lead to another social problem where, just like in the movie Her, people got addicted to their operating system. And I jokingly call it not eHarmony, but me-harmony. If this chatbot or AI engine knows exactly what you want to hear all the time and tells you everything you want to hear, why would you listen to anybody else? So there's this notion that you'll end up tuning the world exactly the things you want to see, exactly the things you want to hear, and that, if you think of it, could be some pretty incredible money-making opportunity right there. What I want to leave you with is, if we are virtualizing and augmenting reality, it's worth asking, what is reality to us? How do we experience it? And then how do we alter that experience? Fundamentally, our experience of reality is really through our senses. So if that's the case, what other senses can we hack and play with? We're going to have seeables. That's the state of the market today. But we'll soon have hearables, feelables, ingestibles, smellables, implantables, and much, much more. But the point is, all of these are senses that can be measured, used as input-output devices, that could be stimulated, simulated, transposed, and basically used to remix and augment our reality. So those are some of the things that I'm sort of seeing on the frontier here, and I think this will create billions and billions of dollars worth of market cap of new companies and technologies out there. So with that, I will open it up if anybody has any questions or comments that they'd like to throw out there.
Hi. Very interesting ideas there. A lot of the stuff, I'm sure you're aware of this, but there have been many people doing some of these things for some time. That particularly, I've forgotten her name, but there's a woman who's been doing VR therapy for overcoming fears, for a long time, and it's extremely effective. I'm just wondering, given the mistitling with the health stuff, whether you felt, I know there are companies that are trying to get FDA approval for games to be prescribed as treatment. Yeah. Do you have a sense of whether you think that's a practical thing in the near future?
So Adam Gazzaley over, at UCSF with Akili, he's showing and collecting evidence to show that these actually are high efficacy means and can be prescribed. So the trigger point for that is the moment you have enough clinical data collected, submit to the FDA, get it approved. Once it can be reimbursed under an existing payer code, game on. At that point, you've unlocked billions of dollars out there, and that's the day doctors can recommend to you a game or digital therapy in addition to a drug or other procedure. That's when this market blows wide open. So we've got several folks pursuing that. Vivid Vision, actually, I think is pursuing that for being reimbursed on existing, payment codes for the lazy eye treatment part. Already seeing some trials now happen for PTSD treatment, especially combined with things like MDMA and other chemical treatments for treating things like a post-traumatic stress disorder with VR, AR. So I think those are going to be amazing supplements to things like pharmaceuticals and other treatments. But it stems to enough clinical data, FDA approval of it, and then reimbursement and then prescription. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're a Dutch mobile game developer from Holland, and we've been looking at the opportunity to shift to VR. But we saw one problem, that one weapon should be heavier or should feel different than another. And that's a problem we see with VR. And how do you think that will, be solved in a short term?
Sorry, there's a bit of echo. What's the problem you saw?
Well, in our game you have different weapons. And what if one weapon is supposed to be heavier than another? How are you going to solve that? Because you can't really touch or feel stuff in VR.
Oh, good question. So controllers with haptics and other sort of dynamic weight and things like that will be a big, big upsell opportunity. There's a company called Tactical Haptics doing things where they can actually simulate friction and weight through more motors that are tensile, so they sort of do torsion and things like that.
How is that called?
tactical haptics. So that's an example where by using motors in the surface that do torsion, you can actually simulate what it's like when you're lifting a heavier object or not. So anything with a grip, their demo is definitely worth checking out, but they can simulate when you're pulling a bowstring, you can actually kind of feel it. The way it usually works is it's sort of tension across skin surfaces, right? So those will be an opportunity. Even sort of upselling controls, FPS with different type of weapons, I think that's actually quite interesting. Maybe, like I said, I want a realistic one. What if you actually have a holster that you have to put the pistol in, as well as a rifle, you have to wear the thing on the back, right? So that gets pretty interesting.
Thanks.
Yeah. Military simulators and trainers are using these, by the way, so you actually have weight-accurate systems there.
Okay, yeah, because we have so much different weapons, and you can't really feel them. So that was a problem we saw. Thank you.
Great. All right, with that, thank you guys for your attention. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.